Now, the first thing to notice is exactly what a function is. What is a function? Now, if you recall what you looked at when you looked at built-in functions, basically a function does something specific. For example, you've got the print function, which prints out things on your screen, or you've got a length function, which gives you the length of objects and stuff like that. So a function does something which is specific. So if you are going to create your own functions, this function you're creating should be able to do something specific. You cannot create a function which does so many things at once. No. Your function has to be able to do one thing in particular, and it has to be able to do it very well. Are we clear? Also,
Yes,
as you are aware,
Yes, sir.
we do not want you to create functions which other people have already created. We want you to just use the functions other people have created, if that function is already there and if you've got access to it. So before you go about trying to create your own functions, make sure that function is not there. Because otherwise, if it's there, then you're just repeating what other people have already done. Are we clear? Is that clear?
yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So that's the first
Yes, sir.
thing. Yeah. So what we're going to do in this chapter, we are going to learn how to create your own functions. How do you tell Python you want to create your own function? Then we are also going to learn how to use these functions you have created. How do you give them information? Then how do you give that particular information in terms of arguments and parameters? So once you create a function, you want to use that function. So after you create a function, you want to use the function. If you want to use a function, that is what is called calling a function. So you call a function. You trying to use that function, you call a function. In the process of calling this function, you might decide to give this function some information. Okay, so in the process of calling the function, or in the process of creating this function, you might decide to give this function information. The information you give a function when you are creating it, that is what is called a parameter or parameters. So parameters are pieces of information you give a function when you are creating the function. Then once the function has been created, when you want to use the function, when you want to call the function, then you want to give information to this function, then that information you're giving it, those are what are called arguments. So when you are creating a function, you can give this function information at creation. Then once it has been created, you can try to use this function. Using a function is what we call calling a function, and in the process of calling the function, you can give it information, and that information is what is called arguments. There are two types of arguments. There's something called positional arguments. We're going to see what these are. There's also something called keyword arguments. So either you can give information to a function using keyword arguments or using default arguments. But these are not the only kind of arguments you have. There's also something called default parameters and also an optional argument in a function. So we're going to see what these are. So default arguments, keyword arguments, default parameters, optional arguments, all these are ways of giving information to a function. Okay. Positional arguments and keyword arguments, you give them the function. Default parameter is given to a function when it's being created. An optional argument is also given to a function when it's being created. So these others are set to a function at creation. Now, the whole point of you creating a function is that this particular function should do something. Once you give your function information, then that particular function should tell you what it has done with the information. That is what is called returning a value or a set of values. So your function can return one value, or your function can return multiple values. So it can give back to you multiple values. Otherwise, then what's the point of creating a function which does not give you back anything? So that's basically the whole idea about functions. Your function should be able to do something. You give it some information, then it does something with this information, then it should give you back the answer. Okay. The other thing is there are also other ways of making functions accept multiple arguments, so we're going to see that. Okay. So how do we create a function? For you to create a function, the first thing you do is you tell Python you want to create a function. And how do you tell Python you want to create a function? You do that by typing def. So you type this def, So when you type this def, which stands for define, you are telling Python, hello, I want to create a function. After this def, you put a space. Then after the space, the name of the function. So in this case, the name of our function is square. So the first thing you are noticing here is that your function should have a name. The name of that function should be similar to what that particular function is going to do. Okay. Then after that, does your function accept any information? What information do you want to give to your function? So the information you want to give to your function is put in these parentheses, these two brackets. That's where you put the information you want to give to your function, if that function accepts information. In our case, we have not put anything here, so we are telling Python to say our function square will not accept any information. After that, so once we are done with the name of the function and whether our function will accept information or not, we end our definition of a function with the colon. So this tells Python to say we are done with the name of the function, and also we are done with sorting out the issue of whether this function will accept information or not. So in our case, our function will not accept information. Okay. The next thing you need to include in your function is something called a doc screen. This is a short description of what your function does. So in this case, this short description of what the function does is included in what are called triple quotation marks. So when you press the quotation, the double quotation mark or the single quotation button 3 times, then these triple quotation marks are going to come up. Then after that, you type in between the 3 quotation marks, and this is what you get. So basically, let me show a bit. So here, if you I press 1, 2. When I press 3 times, that's what I end up with. Then I can type in between the quotation marks, like that. That's how you end up with that. So you press the quotation button 3 times. So in this case, 1, 2, 3. I end up with that. Then in between, I can type something. So what this is what we are calling a doc screen. So whatever the description, so the description of what the function does, that's what you include within these triple quotation marks. So in our case here, as you can see, the description of what the function does is that it just prints out the square of 2. So after printing out the square of 2, next we carry out whatever the function is supposed to do. So in this example, so here the comment is calculate the square of 2. So the square of 2, I calculate it using the power function, which you have seen before. So the power of 2 raised to the power 2, that's going to be 4. Then the result of this function, power, I store it in this variable sq. Then I print out sq like that. Are we clear?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Follow.
So I print out sq like that. So when I run this, Python doesn't complain. Then I can ask for help on what this function is supposed to do. So it says, oh, the function is, yes, I know the function square. This is how it's supposed to be used without any arguments. Then what does it do? It says prints out the square of 2. So that is the description of what the function does. Are we clear? So
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
we have created our function square here.
Does it matter?
Sorry?
Does the version of Python matter, or both of them is the same?
Yes, it matters, the version of Python. So in our case, we're using Python 3.
Oh,
Yes. So in our case, we're using Python 3. So once you create your function, there it is. We know that it's there. The next thing you do is you can call the function. How do you call the function? You start with the name of the function, then followed by these parentheses. So in our case, we are not including anything in these parentheses. That's what you have said. So when you do that, when you run that, it prints out 4. That's what the function is supposed to do. It's supposed to print out the square of 2. Okay? When we run the function again here, it also prints out 4. When we run it again here, it prints out 4. So you start noticing a problem here, that our function square only prints out the square of 2, which is 4. So every time we call it, it prints out 4. So it can do that, but it's not very useful. Okay? If you try to say, okay, I want the square of 3. So you put in between the parentheses here, if you give it a number 3, say I want the square of 3. When you try to do this, Python complains and it tells you there's an error. What is the error? It says here, square takes 0 positional arguments, but 1 was given. So Python refuses to work out the square of 3 because, according to how we created our function, it has no ability to accept information. Are we clear? That's what we said. Say you don't accept anything. So when you try to work out a square of another number, then this function doesn't work. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, the function doesn't work. So we need to do something. We need to recreate this function so that it can accept a number. Okay? So that when you give it 3, then it squares the 3, we can get out a 9. Are we clear? When you give it a 4, it squares the 4, we get a 16. You give it 5, it squares the 5, you get 25. Something like that. That way it's going to be a more useful function than the way it is at the moment. So how do we do that? So we need to go back and recreate our function. Okay? So we need to go back here, we redefine, we say, okay, define, the name of the function is square. Now we put in a variable, something like number. So we put in number there. So the idea here is that you should be able to give this function a number, and that number you're going to give it like the way we gave it 3 here. The way we gave the function the number 3 here, that 3 should be stored in this variable number here. So when you give a function 3, that 3 should be stored in this variable number. Then after that, you square whatever is stored in number. So number to the power 2, that's a square. Then you work out the square, you store it here, then you print out the square. That's the idea here. So this is how you specify. So this number here is a parameter. When you are creating a function, you're saying this function should accept one piece of information, which is number. Are we clear? Are we
Yes,
clear?
sir.
Yes. So you should accept number. So when a person calls this function with 3, that 3 should be stored in number. Then here, power, number to the power 2. So whatever is in number, you square it, you get to store it as square, then you print out square. So that's how things are supposed to be. So this is how you make a function accept information. So when you do that, okay, it accepts, then you ask for help. Now we are told, okay, if you want to use square, you need to provide a number in the parentheses here. Then you need to print out the square of number. So now that you have changed how square works, when we try to do what we did earlier, square without anything, we run into problems now. So now the function square says square missing one required positional argument. So it's missing a piece of information called an argument. or a positional argument, and the name of that positional argument is number. So you need to give it a number for it to work with. Okay, so in this case, okay, we say fine, let's give square a value of number 5. When you do that, you get 25. When you do this, you get 9. Now it works in some way or fashion. It's not perfect, but it's doing what we think is supposed to do. Are we clear? Are we clear?
Yes, sir. We are clear.
Okay, so that's basically how you pass information to a function.
Yes, sir.
You need to tell the function when you are creating it, say, expect this piece of information, expect this information like that. Next, so arguments. So you notice here, it mentioned something like a positional argument. Apparently, something called a positional argument was supposed to be given, but none was given. So, an argument is what you give a function to work with when you are calling it. Are we clear? An argument is what you give a function when you are calling it to work with. So in this case, I gave the function a value 5. So this is the argument. This 5 is going to be stored in this number. Then, so that when you square a number here, what you're squaring is actually 5. The same way, this 3 will be stored in number, so that when you square a number, what you're squaring is actually 3. So there are two types of arguments you can give to a function. One is called positional arguments, like in this case, where you just put the number or the value you want to give the function. The other one is called a keyword argument. Now, in a keyword argument, what you do is you match. You do the following. You do this. Square. You specifically do this. Square number 3. This is what is referred to as a keyword argument. This is another way of passing information to a function. So here, cos square with positional argument, positional argument, argument 3. Then I can say here next cos square with keyword argument, with keyword arguments. So these are two ways in which you can pass information to your function. Like this. So the other one, when you just pass the value like this is what is called a positional argument. When you do it like this is what is referred to as a keyword argument. Are we clear? Are we clear? Is there any question?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So,
So
position.
can you just repeat on what you were saying about calling? I think my network is lagging a bit behind, so it's taking long to show what you're doing.
Calling a function is using a function. When we want to use a function you've created, that is what you call calling a function. So there are two ways you can do that. Either you can do it like this, the name of the function, then inside the parentheses you put the value you want to give the function, you want to call the function with, like this, so it gives you 9. Or you specifically tell the function, so okay, this is the name of the function, say I want you to store the number 3 in the variable number, like this. So those are two ways you can use. You can clearly see that the second method way of doing it is more clear what's happening. And that is what we encourage. We encourage the second way, but even the first way works. even though the first way can generate errors, especially in the case where a function accepts more than two values as arguments. So you can create a function which accepts more than two values. For example, as we are going to show, we are going to create a function called subtract. So this function called subtract actually carries out a subtraction of two numbers. So we tell Python, say we want to create a function, so we start with define, then the name of the function we want to create, which is subtract. Then this function subtract should expect two values. It should expect something called first number, then it should also expect something called second number. So the pieces of information the function should expect are separated by a comma here. Then after that, since we just want to subtract two numbers, then colon. Then next, we include the doc screen, which is what the function is supposed to do. It says print out the difference between two numbers. So how is it going to do that? So it's going to get first number here, first number minus second number. So here, first number, calculate the difference, first number minus second number. So whatever the difference is going to be stored in this variable DFF. Then after that, you're going to print out what DFF is. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we run this like that. Then we can ask for help on how to use our function subtract. So basically it says, okay, subtract, then it expects two pieces of information, something first number and a second number. Then of course here you get a description of what the function is supposed to do, prints out the difference between two numbers. So if you call subtract without giving information, when it expects two pieces of information, when you do that, when you try to do that, what you're going to get is actually an error. So you get an error and Python tells you subtract missing two required positional arguments, first number and second number. If you call subtract with one number, this 20, if you can, it tells you subtract missing one required positional argument, second number. So you notice something here. When you don't give subtract anything, it tells you it is missing two required positional arguments. If you give it one value, it tells you it's only missing one required positional argument. The one it's missing is the second one. So it's not missing the first number. The first number has been provided, which is this 20. So this 20 you've put there, the 20 has been stored in first number. Are we clear? So that one is not missing. The 20 is not missing. The first number is not missing. Okay? Then if you do this, if you provide two values now, so the 20 is going to be stored in first number, the 7 is going to be stored in second number. If you do this, then what you get is 13. That's what you get. So if you provide 20 and 7, so the 20 will be stored in first number, the 7 is going to be stored in second number, then the difference between 20, which is the first number, minus second number, which is 7, that gives you a 13. That's the difference. Then it prints out the 13 here. That's how you get your 13 here. Is that clear?
Yes, sir. It's clear.
Okay. If you change, you put the 7 first, and you put the 20. The 7 is going to be stored in first number. The 20 is going to be stored in second number, such that when you run subtract, what you're going to end up is with minus 13. So you see something about positional arguments. The first number is always stored in the first argument. The second number is stored in second argument. So you have got no control where Python stores things when you do this. When you provide positional arguments, Python will try to do the best you can. It will say, okay, You've given me two values and the function needs two values, fine. So I'll store the first number in the first, this 20 in first number, the 7 I'll store it in second number. If you try to do something like this, it says, okay, I've been given two values, so I'll store 7 in first number, I'll store 20 in second number, then the difference, it prints out 13. If you try to subtract 3 values when it requires only 2 values, say subtract takes 2 positional arguments but 3 were given. So it gets this first one, it puts it in first number, it gets the second one, it puts it in second number, but there is this value here, it doesn't know where to put it. Then it checks. It's like, I only need 2, but 3 have been given. Okay? So the other thing you learn here is that when you create a function, if your function takes 3 values or 2 values, give it 2 values. If you give it 3 or less, then it's going to complain. Are we clear?
Yes, sir. We are clear.
So you have to match the number of items your function expects with the values you are providing. Other way of doing things is by using a keyword arguments. So with keyword arguments, with subtract, you will actually be specific. You tell Python, I want the value 20 to be stored in first number. I want the value 7 to be stored in second number, like this. So these are what are called keyword arguments. Or you say you change it like this, second number to have 7, first number to have 20. So whether with keyword arguments, whether something comes first or you write the other one first or second, it doesn't matter. As long as you have specified that 7 is supposed to go in second number and 20 is supposed to go in first number here, it doesn't matter, the result is the same. Are we clear?
Yes, sir.
Any question? So here you are specifying where a value is supposed to be stored. So it makes things much easier for people to understand what you're doing. So this is what we encourage. We encourage you to be specific about where you are storing your information, in which variable is your information being stored. So in this case, 20 is being stored as the first number, and 7 is being stored as the second number. Whether you write first number equals to 20, second number in 7, you write it first or second, it won't matter, the result will come out the same. Okay. Any questions? You have a question?
My question
What's your question?
is
I can't hear your question.
that we need to. What you're saying, is there a theory of fact? Yes, you know what you're saying, other than just the programming and the coding.
The what?
Other than the programming and the coding, is there a theory of fact, like what we need to know? Yes, like to what are there questions? Maybe just the theory behind it, like questions in theory that we need to know.
I'm teaching.
Like, are there questions?
You want questions when I'm teaching? Questions are coming, but the only way you're going to solve, the only way you solve those questions, the only way you solve the questions we are going to ask you is if you know how to program. In this course, your lab is 25%. Is it 25? Yeah, something like 25 or something like that. Of course, your tests are, yes, your lab is 25%. Your test is 10%, 10%. Then there's a 5% somewhere. I think your labs are 30% in this course. Your labs must be 30%. There's 25% for the labs. There must be 5% for a quiz. Then your test 1 and test 2, those are 10%, 10%. So out of your CA, 30% goes to the labs. And in those labs, we want you to program. Yes, 30%. That's why we are spending so much time in teaching you how to program, because that's what we are going to expect you to do. We will not give you 30% for free. Are we clear?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, we're good.
Yes. So that 30% is for you to program. We'll give you a lab manual and we'll ask you to fill in things. That's where the 30% is. Okay. Yeah.
So,
Mm.
noted.
Boss, there's programming to be done.
Specific programs that would have.
Is there what?
Are there specific programs that would have to make and run, or it's just random?
You make programs.
Like
Wanda.
specific programs.
We'll
that
ask
would
you
have
to do make the what you
Or it's just random. Anything can come.
No, it's not anything, Wanda. In this course, there are certain things which need to be done. And those things which need to be done are done with computers. There's certain mathematics you need to do, and you need to use Python.
Okay.
Yes. This is a mathematics course, but mathematics where you use computers, yes. So that mathematics will show you how it's done on paper, then we'll ask you to do it using a computer.
I get
Okay.
it.
Another piece of information you can give a function when you are creating it is something called a default parameter value or default parameters. In this case, we are going to create a function called person. So in this function called person, what this function does is you give it your first name, the first name of a person, the last name of the person, and the country where that person comes from. But as you can see, we have provided a value for country in case this person does not give us the name of a country. We want to use Zambia. So if this person just gives us the first name and the last name, then they forget to give us the country, then we are going to assume they are from Zambia. So what does the function do? Here, prints out the full names of a person and country of origin. Are we clear? So this value I've said, say in case, if someone gives us a country, which is not Zambia, we're going to use that country. But if they don't give us a country, then we're going to use Zambia. This is what is called a default parameter value. This Zambia here. Zambia is a default parameter value. Are we clear? That is a value to be used. Huh? A default parameter value is a value that is supposed to be used if, in this case, someone does not give us information about their country. Because in this function person, we are asking for three pieces of information. We are asking for their first name, we are asking for their last name, we are also asking the person for their country. So this person has to give us his first name, they have to give us their last name, they also have to give us the country they come from. But if they don't give us a country, if they just give us the first name and the last name, that is also okay, because we have a value which we can use for country, which is Zambia. Are we clear?
Yes, sir. We are.
Okay, so if a person gives us their country, good. Otherwise, if they don't give us a country, we're going to use Zambia. So in this case, my names are, I want to use something different here. My names are full names, the title, full names, the title, then I am from I don't want to use this format thing. It works, yes, but I don't want to use it. Okay, so here, these are different values. My names are full name to title. I am from that. So your first name, which you're going to give us, and your last name, we are going to combine them here. First name plus a space, then last name, so that you can create your full name. This full name we're going to create, we'll store it in this variable here. Then we'll print out my names are whatever your full name is. I am from, then the country which you've given us, if you've given us a country, like that. Is this clear? Let's run it. So we ask for help. So print out your full names and country of origin. So as you can see, the first thing you notice is that there's first name here, there's last name. The parameter with a default value is always put at the end. So country can't come first here. We can't say country equals to Zambia first. No, you always put it at the end. So you start with the first name, then last name, then the parameter which you're going to give a default value to, you have to put it at the end. Is that clear? So always, this one, as you can see, it already has a value set. Country already has a value set, which is Zambia. So you have to put it at the end in this list of pieces of information your function should accept. So there's first name, there's last name, then there's country, which has a value already given at the end. So since our function expects at least two pieces of information, if you call it with nothing, then it tells you two required additional positional arguments are missing: first name and last name. So the only pieces of information missing here are first name and last name. That's what it tells you. It has got no problem with the country because the country value has already been set. So the only things missing are first name and last name. That's what a default value is for. If you don't provide information about a particular piece of information, the value to which that particular piece of information has been set to is going to be used. So in this case, if we say, okay, fine, we're going to provide information about Kenneth as a first name, then the last name is going to be Kaunda as the last name. When you run this function, then it does the following: my names are Kenneth Kaunda, I am from Zambia. Yes. Yeah. Are we clear?
Yes, sir. We're clear.
Yeah, this is what. Now, you notice that we did not, while we are calling this function, we did not give information about the country. But the function used Zambia because that is the value to which we set the country for. Are we clear? We set country to Zambia. Is that clear?
Yes, sir, it makes sense.
Mm-hmm. If you switch
Yes, sir.
Kaunda and Kenneth, now you're switching. Kaunda comes first, then Kenneth comes second. So this Kaunda is going to be stored as first name, then this Kenneth is going to be stored as last name, which we know is not correct because the first name is Kenneth and the second name is Kaunda. So if you do this, so this Kaunda will be stored as first name, this Kenneth will be stored as last name, so you end up with Kaunda Kenneth from Zambia. Again, we did not provide the country information, but Zambia has been used there. So for us to be more accurate in this case, we need to give the information in this format. First name, Kenneth, last name, Kaunda. If you do this, then in that case, it comes out, my names are Kenneth Kaunda, I am from Zambia. If you also do this, person, last name, Kaunda, first name, Kenneth, whether you do it last name first or first name, you start with last name, Kaunda, then later followed by first name, Kenneth, the result still comes out the same. Are we clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
You can also decide to provide information about the country. For example, now these are names of the president of Namibia. That's his first name. That is last name. Then his country. Since he's not Zambian, he's from Namibia. We now provide information about Namibia there. And when you run that, this is what we get. I am Hek Borg. I am from Namibia. So Zambia is not used. So if you provide information, then Zambia is not used. If you provide information about country, then Zambia is not used. If you forget to provide information about the country, in the case of this gentleman, then what's going to happen is that the function will tell you that this gentleman, who is a president of Namibia, comes from Zambia, because you did not provide information about the country. Are we clear? On what a default value does.
Yes, sir. We're clear.
Yeah. So that's what a default value is for.
Yeah.
A default value is there for use if you do not provide information about a particular something. And you are going to see a lot of these default values in the functions which we are going to look at and the ones we'll be using in this course. So you should have an understanding of what's going on, because these same things, as simple as they are, there are situations where these things are being seriously used. The function, these keyword functions or positional arguments, these default values which we're looking at like this. And how do you call a function? So the other thing is something called equivalent functions. If these are functions which produce the same result. So for example, we can use our person function which we have created here. So there's this gentleman, he plays for Liverpool, Saido Mane. His first name here is Saido. His last name is Mane, and he comes from Senegal. So I just provide these three pieces of information. I start with Saido, Mane, and Senegal. So the first name, which is Saido, this first value is stored in first name. Then this second value I've given is going to be stored in last name. Then this third value, which is the country, Senegal, is going to be stored in country. If I run that, this is what I get. My name is Saido Mane. I am from Senegal. If I decide to set country to Senegal, like that, more specific, then the first value, I just leave it as Saido. Then the last value, second value as Mane. You will see that these first two are positional arguments. Why positional? Because the first value, according to the first item, which is the first in the list of these things, is going to be stored in first name. Then the second one is going to be stored in last name. Then this one is a key value argument. There is a parameter and the value which is supposed to be stored in that parameter there. So this gives you the same thing, which is the same as this one here. My name is Saido Mane, I'm from Senegal. My name is Saido Mane, I'm from Senegal. Next, if you want to be more specific, so this is how you move. You start specifying the last one. Then you move to the second last one. Last name is equals to Mane, country, Senegal, then this, like this. Then that's the same. Then also here, first name, Saido, last name, Mane, country of origin, Senegal. Now this is the best way of doing things, where you specifically specify that Saido is supposed to be stored in first name, then Mane, which is his surname, is supposed to be stored in last name, then country, which is Senegal, is supposed to be stored in country. So this is the best way of calling a function, so that there is no guesswork where this information is being stored. Are we clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we're going to stop here today. We have looked at how to create a function. We have looked at how to create a function in such a way that it's able to accept information. We have also looked at how to pass information to a function using positional arguments, using using keyword parameters, and also using default values. So the next thing, as you are aware, our functions so far have just been printing stuff. So they are not giving us anything. Okay? So what you really want, in fact, is when you are creating a function, you want that function to give you pieces of information in return which you can use. These things which are being printed here, you can't use them for anything. They're just printed to your screen like this. You can't use them. You can't store them in a variable. But what you want is to be given a value which you can actually store in a variable, and that's what we're going to do with return values. We're going to see how do you get something out of a function so that you can do things with it. Okay, so that's what you're going to do on Friday. Any questions?
No questions on my side.
Okay, so I encourage you to rewatch this video so that you continue from the return values, so that when you have any questions, you ask. So what I'm asking you to do is continue to watch this video on creating your own functions. There's also the other video on creating lambda functions. So you watch that. It's very, very short. The one for creating lambda functions. So that when you meet on Friday, we finish up this thing here. How do you create your own functions, and how do you create lambda functions? They're very, very important for our course. Then after that, again, for the weekend, we'll give you another list of videos for you to have a look at, so that when we meet next week, we discuss. We only look at the things which were difficult. The things which we know will be very easy, we'll skip those, but you only look at the parts which are difficult, so that we can move much faster. Because at the moment, we are just looking at programming. Yes, it's an important part of the course, but accounting for 30%, but yeah. Eventually, after some point, we'll need to start looking at the actual mathematics itself, which we need to look at. Any questions? Okay, if there are no questions, we'll stop here for today. So, I'll see you on Friday at 12:30 to 14 hours. All right, I'll stop sharing.